London, May 1817. The season was drawing to a close, and Catherine Hartley knew precisely what that meant. Another year passed, another year older, another year further from the possibility of anything changing. She stood near the tall windows of the Thornbury ballroom, watching the swirl of dancers with the detachment of someone observing a play in which she had no part. At 32, Catherine had long since accepted her place in society's margins. She attended events only because her sister Margaret insisted, claiming it looked odd for Catherine to hide away completely. "People will think you have given up entirely," Margaret had said that evening while they dressed. Catherine had not bothered to reply. She had given up. Years ago, in fact, when she had refused 3 perfectly adequate proposals to care for her dying mother. By the time Mother passed, Catherine was 28, ancient by society's measure. The proposals had stopped coming. Now she lived with Margaret and her husband, Lord James Hartley, in their Mayfair townhouse, occupying the role of spinster aunt before there were even nieces or nephews to dote upon. A cautionary tale in silk and propriety. Poor Miss Hartley. The voice drifted from a cluster of young women near the refreshment table, bright and careless as birdsong. Still attending balls at her age? How optimistic. Catherine's fingers tightened on her fan. She recognized the voice. Miss Lydia Worthington, 19 and beautiful, with golden curls and the absolute certainty that came from never having been refused anything. "Do you suppose she still hopes?" another girl asked, dissolving into giggles. "At 32? Surely not." Lydia's voice carried perfect clarity across the ballroom. "Though I suppose one must occupy oneself somehow. Poor creature." "Speaking of hope," a third voice chimed in, "is the Marquess of Ashford truly here tonight? I have not seen him." "He is." Lydia's tone shifted to something predatory. "And thank heavens he prefers youth and beauty. Can you imagine if he took notice of someone like Miss Hartley?" The scandal! The girls erupted in laughter. Catherine felt the familiar weight settle in her chest, that stone that had taken up permanent residence somewhere behind her ribs. It was not the cruelty that wounded her most. She had grown accustomed to cruelty. It was the casual nature of it, the thoughtless dismissal, as if she were already dead and they were simply remarking upon her ghost. She turned away from the windows, from the dancers, from the cluster of lovely young things who could not imagine a future that included becoming invisible. The ballroom felt suddenly suffocating, all heat and noise and the cloying scent of too many perfumes mingling in the air. Catherine slipped through a side door into the corridor beyond. The Thornbury mansion was vast, and she had attended enough events here to know her way. The library lay at the end of the east wing, a sanctuary of leather and paper that would be blessedly empty. The door opened soundlessly. Catherine stepped inside and breathed deeply, letting the familiar scent of old books calm her frayed nerves. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating rows of volumes that climbed to the ceiling. She moved toward the poetry section, trailing her fingers along the spines until she found Byron. "Escaping as well?" Catherine startled violently, spinning toward the voice. A man sat in one of the wing chairs near the fireplace, barely visible in the shadows. As he stood and moved into the moonlight, Catherine's breath caught. Alexander Pemberton, Marquess of Ashford. She recognized him from glimpses across ballrooms, though they had never been introduced. He was tall, dark-haired, perhaps 35 or 36, with the kind of aristocratic features that belonged in portraiture. And he was watching her with what appeared to be genuine curiosity rather than the polite dismissal she had come to expect. "Forgive me," Catherine managed, clutching Byron to her chest like a shield. "I did not realize anyone was here. I shall leave you to your privacy." "Please do not." He moved closer, and Catherine saw that he held a book as well. I came here for the same reason you did, I suspect. The ballroom was becoming unbearable. For you. The words escaped before Catherine could stop them. Surely the Marquess of Ashford is the most sought-after gentleman in any ballroom. Precisely the problem. His mouth curved into a wry smile. Tell me, Miss Hartley, Catherine Hartley. Miss Hartley. He gestured to the chairs by the fireplace. Would you think it terribly improper if I asked you to stay? I find I am starved for genuine conversation, and you appear to be someone who actually reads rather than simply poses with books. Catherine knew she should refuse, knew she should murmur some excuse and flee back to the ballroom where Margaret could keep watch over her reputation. But something in his voice, in the tired honesty of it, made her hesitate. Byron? He asked, nodding to the volume she held. Yes, though I confess I prefer Wordsworth. Do you? His expression brightened with unmistakable interest. So do I. There is something about Byron that feels performative. Brilliant, certainly, but always aware of his audience. Whereas Wordsworth writes as if no one is watching. Catherine moved toward the chairs, drawn despite herself, as if he is simply capturing truth. Exactly so. They sat, and for the next half hour, Catherine forgot to be invisible. They discussed poetry and literature with an ease she had not experienced since her father died. Alexander listened when she spoke, actually listened, his attention never wavering to the door or the clock. He laughed at her observations, challenged her opinions, treated her as if her thoughts mattered. Catherine could not remember the last time anyone had done that. Catherine? Margaret's voice called from the corridor, sharp with concern. Catherine, are you in here? The spell shattered. Catherine stood quickly, smoothing her skirts with trembling hands. Alexander rose as well, his expression regretful. That would be my sister. I should... Of course. He caught her hand gently before she could move away. Miss Hartley, might I have permission to call upon you? Catherine stared at him, certain she had misheard. I beg your pardon? I should very much like to continue our conversation, if you would permit it. Catherine. Margaret appeared in the doorway, breathless and flushed. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. Oh, my lord, I did not realize. Lady Hartley. Alexander bowed. I was just asking your sister if I might call upon her tomorrow. Margaret's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Catherine used the moment to extract her hand from his. You are very kind, my lord. Catherine said carefully, but I am certain you have many demands upon your time. None more important than this. His eyes held hers, and Catherine felt something dangerous unfurl in her chest, something that felt treacherously like hope. Tomorrow afternoon, then? He pressed. Yes, tomorrow afternoon. Catherine let Margaret pull her from the library, back through the corridor and into the ballroom. Her mind spun with confusion and disbelief. Had that truly happened? Had the Marquess of Ashford actually requested permission to call upon her? Across the ballroom, she saw Lydia Worthington draped artfully across a settee, surrounded by admirers. Lydia caught Catherine's eye and smirked, that same casual cruelty that had driven Catherine to the library in the first place. No, she had imagined his interest, or misunderstood it. Men like Alexander Pemberton did not pursue women like her. It was impossible. Catherine, Margaret whispered urgently, gripping her arm. The Marquess of Ashford was asking about you. Do you understand what this means? Catherine looked at her sister's excited face, then back at Lydia's smirk, then at the crowd of young, beautiful women who belonged in ballrooms while she did not. It means nothing, Catherine said firmly, ignoring the small voice inside her that whispered, Maybe. It was simply a kind gesture, nothing more. But as they prepared to leave, as their carriage pulled away from the Thornbury mansion, Catherine looked back and saw Alexander standing at the library window, watching them go. And despite everything she knew about her place in the world, despite every lesson society had taught her about what women like her could expect, Catherine let herself wonder, just for a moment, just until morning came and reminded her of reality. 2 days later, Alexander Pemberton arrived at the Hartley residence precisely at 3 o'clock. Catherine heard the commotion from her room, where she had been trying and failing to read for the past hour. Margaret burst through the door without knocking. "He came," Margaret breathed, eyes wide. "Catherine, he actually came." Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. "Did James receive him?" "Reluctantly. You must come down immediately." The drawing-room was tense when Catherine entered. Lord James Hartley stood near the fireplace, his expression somewhere between bewildered and disapproving. Alexander rose from his chair as she appeared, and Catherine saw genuine pleasure light his features. "Miss Hartley, thank you for receiving me." "My lord." Catherine curtsied, hyper-aware of James watching every movement. "You honour us with your visit." They sat. Margaret poured tea with hands that trembled slightly. The conversation began awkwardly, stilted by James's presence, but gradually found its rhythm. Alexander spoke of his estate in Kent, of renovations he planned, of his interest in agricultural reform. Catherine responded with intelligence and engagement, and slowly James's rigid posture began to ease, until Alexander said, "I am hosting a small gathering at Ashford Park this weekend. Lady Hartley, Miss Hartley, I would be honoured if you would attend." The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine felt James's stare boring into the side of her head. "That is most generous, my lord," James said carefully, "but my sister-in-law rarely accepts social invitations. She prefers the quiet of home." Catherine's cheeks burned. It was true, but hearing James state it so boldly made her sound like an invalid, rather than someone who had simply learned where she was not wanted. Alexander's gaze never left Catherine's face. Perhaps she might make an exception. The moment stretched. Catherine knew what she should do. Decline politely. Make some excuse about prior commitments or delicate health. Retreat back into the safety of invisibility. Instead, she heard herself say, "I should be delighted to attend, my lord." Margaret inhaled sharply. James's expression darkened. Alexander smiled as if she had given him something precious. "Excellent. I shall send my carriage Saturday morning." After he departed, James rounded on her immediately. "Have you lost your senses? People will talk, Catherine. They are already talking. The Marquess of Ashford calling upon a woman your age, inviting you to his estate. The scandal—" "James," Margaret interrupted quietly, surprising them both. "Perhaps we should allow Catherine to make her own decisions." James stared at his wife as if she had suggested Catherine take up highway robbery. But he said nothing more, simply stalked from the room with barely contained disapproval. Catherine sank into her chair, hands shaking now that Alexander was gone, and reality reasserted itself. "Sister," Margaret said softly, kneeling beside her. "Do you truly think—" "I think nothing," Catherine replied, though her heart said otherwise. "I think I am a foolish woman indulging in fantasies better left to younger, prettier girls." "Or," Margaret suggested, squeezing her hand, "you are a woman who deserves happiness as much as anyone." Saturday arrived with perfect weather. The journey to Ashford Park took 2 hours, and Catherine spent most of it in silent panic. What was she doing? What did Alexander truly want from her? The rational part of her mind insisted this was either pity or some incomprehensible whim that would fade the moment he tired of playing at charity. But when they arrived, and he greeted them at the entrance, when he looked at Catherine as if she were the reason he had opened his home, that rational voice grew quieter. Ashford Park was magnificent, all golden stone and manicured grounds. Alexander gave them a tour, pointing out architectural features and family history. Margaret commented on the gardens, wandering toward them with clear intent to give Catherine and Alexander privacy. They walked the grounds alone, the spring air soft and fragrant with apple blossoms. For a while neither spoke. Then Alexander said, "I should explain something." Catherine braced herself. Here it came, the revelation that this was all a misunderstanding, that his interest was avuncular or philanthropic or anything other than what she had begun, dangerously, to hope. 5 years ago, he continued, I was engaged to be married. She was 19, beautiful, everything society demands in a wife. Catherine said nothing, though her chest tightened. 3 weeks before the wedding, I overheard her speaking with her mother. They thought I was still out riding. He paused, jaw tight. She said, and I quote, "I shall tolerate the old boar for his title and his fortune. Once I have produced an heir, I need never pretend affection again." My lord. Catherine breathed, genuinely appalled. I am so sorry. I ended the engagement immediately, created quite the scandal. He looked at her then, something raw in his expression. I spent the next 5 years evading every debutante and matchmaking mamma in England. They all seemed the same. Young, yes, pretty, certainly, and utterly empty. They had reached a small folly overlooking a lake. Alexander gestured to a bench, and they sat. Then, 2 nights ago, I found a woman hiding in a library, clutching Byron like a talisman. His voice softened, and she spoke about poetry as if it mattered, as if ideas and words and truth were things worth caring about. She did not simper or flirt or calculate. She was simply real. Catherine's eyes burned. I am not young, my lord. No. He reached out, taking her hand in his. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm. You are better. You have lived. You have loved and lost and survived. You are not performing youth or beauty or innocence. You are simply Catherine, and she is the most compelling woman I have encountered in 5 years of searching. Catherine could not breathe, could not think. His thumb traced circles on her palm, and she felt the world tilt on its axis. I know society sees me as a relic, she whispered, past my prime, past any hope of... Then society is blind. Alexander lifted her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles. I spent 5 years surrounded by girls. I want a woman. I want you. The moment hung between them, fragile and perfect. Then Margaret's voice called from the gardens, breaking the spell. I should return you to your sister, Alexander said reluctantly, though he did not release her hand immediately. But Catherine, I need you to understand, this is not charity, this is not pity. This is me, finally finding what I thought no longer existed. On the journey home, Margaret chattered excitedly while Catherine sat in silence, replaying every word, every glance, every touch. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps, impossibly, she might be wanted. Not despite her age, but including it. All of it, the week following the visit to Ashford Park, passed in a haze. Alexander called twice more, each visit leaving James more disapproving and Margaret more convinced that this was genuine. Catherine existed in a strange, liminal space between terror and joy, unable to fully trust what seemed to be happening. Then came Lady Prescott's evening gathering, a smaller affair than most balls, but still significant. Margaret insisted Catherine attend, and Catherine, buoyed by Alexander's attention, agreed. She should have known better. The drawing room was crowded with perhaps 50 guests. Catherine had barely entered when she heard the whispers begin. They followed her like a wake as she moved through the room, people turning to watch, to murmur, to judge. Can you imagine? At her age? The Marquess must be toying with her. How cruel. Perhaps he lost a wager. Catherine's composure began to crack. She sought out Margaret, who was speaking with Lady Prescott near the windows. Before she could reach her sister, Lydia Worthington appeared, blocking her path. 3 other young women flanked her, all wearing expressions of gleeful malice. "Miss Hartley?" Lydia purred, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "How unexpected to see you here. I thought you preferred quiet evenings at home. Miss Worthington." Catherine attempted to step around her, but Lydia moved as well, maintaining the blockade. "Tell me, what is your secret? How does one capture the attention of a Marquess at your advanced age?" Lydia's smile was razor-sharp. "We are all simply desperate to know." One of her companions giggled. "Perhaps experience compensates for youth. Or perhaps—" Lydia continued, eyes glittering with cruelty. "The Marquess is simply being charitable. So kind of him, really, to take pity on poor Miss Hartley, to make her feel as if she still matters, even for a moment." The words struck like physical blows. Catherine felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling, all her fears and insecurities confirmed in Lydia's smirk. "After all," Lydia added, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that somehow carried across the entire room, "we all know that at her age, love is impossible. This is merely kindness." Catherine's vision blurred. She was vaguely aware of people staring, of the horrible weight of their judgment pressing down on her. Before anyone could say anything else, before she could humiliate herself further by weeping publicly, she turned and fled. The French doors leading to the terrace stood open. Catherine pushed through them, gulping cool night air, trying desperately to regain control. But the tears came anyway, hot and shameful, streaming down her cheeks. "Catherine." She spun to find Alexander emerging onto the terrace, his expression dark with concern. Of course he had witnessed her humiliation. Could this evening become any worse? "Please," she managed, holding up a hand to ward him off. "Please, just leave me alone." "Not until you tell me what happened." He moved closer despite her protest. "I saw Miss Worthington speaking with you. Then you ran. What did she say?" "The truth." Catherine's voice broke on the word. She dashed tears from her cheeks angrily. "She said what everyone is thinking. That you are being charitable. That this, whatever this is merely pity." "That is absurd." "Is it?" Catherine rounded on him, all her accumulated pain and fear spilling out. "Look at me, my lord. Truly look at me. I am 32 years old. I have no fortune, no remarkable beauty, no youthful bloom. I am precisely what Lydia Worthington called me. A relic. And you are the Marquess of Ashford. You could have anyone. Anyone. I want you." His voice was fierce, but Catherine could not hear it past the roar of her own doubt. "Why?" she demanded. "Why would you possibly want me when you could have a 19-year-old bride who would give you beautiful children and decades of companionship? I have nothing to offer you but what little time I have left before I become a complete and utter embarrassment." "Stop." Alexander caught her shoulders, his grip gentle but firm. "Stop saying these things. They are true." Catherine pulled away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. "I understand your kindness, my lord. Truly, I do. You saw someone lonely and overlooked, and your generous nature compelled you to show attention. But I cannot be your charity case. I cannot bear it." "Charity case?" Alexander's voice rose. "Is that what you think this is?" "What else could it be?" Catherine whispered. "I am not a fool, my lord. I know my place. I have known it for years. And this this fantasy of being wanted, of being chosen. I allowed myself to believe it, and that was my mistake. But I will not compound that mistake by continuing this charade. Catherine, please. She moved toward the French doors, desperate to escape before she shattered completely. Please leave me alone. Find someone worthy of you. Find someone young and lovely who can give you the life you deserve. But let me go. She did not wait for his response. She pushed back into the drawing room, found Margaret, and insisted they leave immediately. Margaret, seeing her sister's devastation, asked no questions. In the carriage, Catherine finally allowed herself to break. Margaret held her while she sobbed, whispering soothing words that meant nothing against the enormity of Catherine's pain. She had let herself hope, and hope, as she had learned long ago, was the cruelest emotion of all. The next 3 days passed in a blur. Alexander called twice. Both times Catherine refused to see him. He sent letters. She did not open them. Margaret pleaded with her to at least hear him out, but Catherine could not bear it. Every word would be another kindness, another gentle rejection dressed as concern. Better to end it now. Better to retreat back into invisibility before the world could mock her further. On the 3rd day, James announced at breakfast that Margaret was hosting a small dinner party that evening. Just 10 guests, he said. Nothing elaborate. Catherine pleaded exhaustion, but Margaret would not hear of it. You cannot hide forever, sister. You must face society eventually. So Catherine allowed herself to be dressed and coiffed and brought downstairs to play hostess beside her sister. She moved through the evening like an automaton, smiling when required, speaking when spoken to, feeling nothing, until Alexander walked through the door. Catherine froze. Margaret had the grace to look guilty, confirming that this was a calculated ambush. But before Catherine could make excuses and flee, other guests were arriving, and she was trapped by the demands of propriety. Dinner was torture. Catherine sat as far from Alexander as possible, which meant she was beside Lord Edmund Thornbury and across from Miss Lydia Worthington. Of course Lydia was here. This evening was a masterpiece of calculated cruelty, whether Margaret had intended it or not. Lydia held court throughout dinner, regaling the table with gossip and observations, her voice carrying that particular quality of brightness that concealed barbs. Catherine pushed food around her plate and prayed for the evening to end. Then, during the final course, Lydia turned to James with a smile that promised violence. Lord Hartley, I have been meaning to ask, why does your family still parade Miss Hartley in society? She paused delicately. Surely at her age she would be more comfortable in quiet retirement. It seems almost unkind to continue subjecting her to events where she is so obviously out of place. The table fell silent. Catherine felt every eye turn to her, felt the weight of their judgment and pity. She could not breathe, could not move, could only sit frozen while Lydia's cruelty hung in the air like poison. Then Alexander stood. The scrape of his chair against the floor cut through the silence like a blade. Alexander's expression was thunderous, his eyes fixed on Lydia with an intensity that made the young woman pale. Miss Worthington, he said, his voice deadly quiet, perhaps before you presume to educate others on propriety, you might educate yourself on what truly matters in a companion. Lydia opened her mouth, closed it again. The table remained frozen. Alexander turned away from her, dismissing her as if she were nothing. His eyes found Catherine's across the table, and she saw no pity there, no charity, only a fierce determination that made her heart stop. Miss Hartley, he continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the dining room, I have tried to respect your wishes these past 3 days. I have kept my distance as you requested, but I find I cannot do so any longer. Catherine's hands trembled in her lap. She wanted to speak, to stop him, but no words would come. "You believe I sought your company out of pity?" Alexander said, moving around the table toward her. "You believe that my attention was some form of charitable act? Nothing could be further from the truth." He stopped beside her chair. Catherine could not look up, could not bear to see whatever expression he wore. "I spent 5 years surrounded by young women who offered beauty but no substance, who performed innocence and youth as if those qualities alone made them worthy." His voice softened, became almost intimate despite their audience. "Women who cared more for my title than for me, who calculated their every word and gesture, who were precisely what society demanded, and precisely empty because of it." Catherine felt tears building behind her eyes. "Not here. Please, not here. Then I found you." Alexander knelt beside her chair, and the intimacy of the gesture forced Catherine to finally look at him. His eyes held hers with unwavering intensity. A woman who reads poetry not to impress but because she loves it, who speaks her mind rather than what she thinks I want to hear, who has lived enough to know what truly matters, who has loved and lost and survived and emerged stronger for it. "My lord," Catherine whispered, acutely aware of their audience. "Please." "You believe your age disqualifies you from love?" He continued, ignoring her protest. "I believe it makes you perfect for it. You know the value of time. You understand loss. You have nothing to prove and no games to play. You are real, Catherine. You are honest. And you are the most compelling woman I have encountered in 5 years of searching." A tear escaped down Catherine's cheek. Alexander reached up, wiping it away with his thumb with such gentleness that Catherine felt something crack open in her chest. "I do not want a girl who will tolerate me for my title," he said quietly, though his words carried to every listening ear. "I do not want performance or calculation or empty beauty. I want a woman. I want intelligence and honesty and depth. I want someone who has lived enough to know that love is not about youth or perfection, but about finding another soul that recognizes yours." He took her hand in both of his, and Catherine felt the world narrow to just the two of them, despite the room full of witnesses. "Miss Hartley. Catherine." Alexander's voice dropped lower still. "You honor me simply by existing, by being exactly who you are. There is no charity here, no pity. Only a man who has finally found what he thought no longer existed." Catherine could barely see him through her tears. She was vaguely aware of Margaret crying as well, of James's stunned expression, of Lydia's horrified face. Then Alexander shifted, moving from kneeling beside her chair to kneeling before it. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small velvet box. The gasp from the other guests seemed to come from very far away. "Miss Catherine Hartley," Alexander said, opening the box to reveal a ring that caught the candlelight like captured stars. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Time stopped. Catherine stared at him, at the ring, at the impossible question hanging between them. Every instinct screamed that this could not be real, that she would wake tomorrow and find it had been a dream, that men like him did not choose women like her. But the weight of his hands holding hers was real. The tears on his cheeks, he was crying too, she realized with shock, were real. The way he looked at her, as if she were the answer to a question he had been asking for years, was real. "You truly mean this?" Her voice broke on the words. "I have never meant anything more in my life." Alexander's grip tightened on her hand. "Marry me, Catherine. Let me spend the rest of our lives proving that you are wanted, that you are chosen, not despite your age or your history or anything else society claims diminishes you, but because of all of it, because you are perfect exactly as you are." Catherine looked at him, this impossible man offering her an impossible future. Then she looked around the table at the witnesses to this moment, Margaret openly weeping, James frozen in shock, Lydia pale with fury, the other guests watching with expressions ranging from moved to scandalized. Let them watch, let them talk, let them judge. Yes, Catherine whispered. Alexander's expression transformed. Yes? Yes. Louder now, stronger. Yes, I will marry you. He surged up, pulling her from her chair and into his arms in a decidedly improper embrace that made several guests gasp. But Catherine did not care. She wrapped her arms around his neck and let herself be held, let herself believe, let herself finally accept that this was real. When Alexander pulled back, his hands shaking as he slipped the ring onto her finger, Catherine saw the truth written plainly in his face. This was not charity. This was not pity. This was love. I shall make you happy, he promised, his forehead resting against hers. I swear it. You already have, Catherine replied, and meant it with every fibre of her being. The room erupted. Margaret rushed over, embracing both of them while crying harder. James stood slowly, his expression stunned, but not, Catherine noted, displeased. The other guests offered congratulations, with varying degrees of sincerity. Lydia Worthington fled the dining room entirely, though Catherine barely registered her departure. None of it mattered. Only Alexander mattered, and the impossible, wonderful reality that he had chosen her. 1 week later, Catherine stood in the gardens at Ashford Park as the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Alexander's arms encircled her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. You are very quiet, he murmured against her ear. I am thinking. About what? Catherine turned in his embrace, looking up at the man who had somehow seen her when the rest of the world had decided she was invisible. I still cannot quite believe this is real. Alexander smiled, that warm, genuine expression that transformed his aristocratic features into something almost boyish. Perhaps I shall spend our lifetime convincing you. That seems excessive. I consider it a privilege. He kissed her softly, and Catherine marveled at how something so simple could feel so profound. When they parted, Alexander kept her close, his hand cupping her face. What are you truly thinking? Catherine took a breath, trying to find words for the tumult inside her. I spent so many years invisible, watching life happen to other people, believing my chance had passed, and then you. She shook her head, overwhelmed. How did you see me? You were never invisible, Catherine. Alexander's thumb traced her cheekbone, his touch reverent. You were simply waiting for someone worth being seen by. Tears pricked at Catherine's eyes again, but they were different now. Not tears of pain or doubt, but of overwhelming gratitude. For this man, for this moment, for the impossible gift of being wanted exactly as she was. I love you, she said, the words coming easier than she expected. I did not think I would ever say those words to anyone. But I love you. Alexander's expression softened into something that stole Catherine's breath. And I love you. Your intelligence, your honesty, your strength, every single year you have lived and every experience that shaped you into who you are. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Catherine let herself fall into it. Let herself believe fully and completely that this was her future. Not loneliness, not invisibility, not the slow fade into irrelevance society had promised her, but this man, this love, this life. When they finally broke apart, the last rays of sunlight were fading from the sky. Stars were beginning to appear overhead, diamond bright against the darkening blue. Alexander tucked Catherine against his side, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching night claim the world. "Society will talk," Catherine said eventually. "Let them. They will say I trapped you, that I used artifice to snare a Marquess. They will say whatever they wish. Their opinions change nothing." Catherine smiled despite herself. "You are very certain." "I am." Alexander turned her to face him fully, his expression serious now. "Catherine, I wasted 5 years letting society dictate my choices, letting fear of making another mistake keep me from taking any risk at all. Then I found you, and suddenly none of it mattered. Not your age, not what people would say. Only that you were real and honest and everything I did not know I was searching for." He took both her hands in his grip warm and steady. "The love I feel for you is not despite your age. It is enriched by it. Every year you have lived, every experience you carry, every lesson you learned, they made you into the woman standing before me. And she is perfect." Catherine's throat tightened with emotion. "I never thought I would hear those words, never thought anyone would—" "See you," Alexander finished. "Truly see you." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Then I shall spend our marriage ensuring you never doubt it again." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, tender and sweet. "You are seen, Catherine Hartley. You are wanted. You are loved. Not as charity or pity or any other diminishing thing, but as the extraordinary woman you are." Catherine leaned into him, letting his warmth surround her, letting his certainty become her own. Around them, the gardens of Ashford Park settled into evening stillness. Somewhere in the distance, a nightingale began to sing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, society's judgment, Lydia Worthington's continued spite, the 1,000 small cruelties that came from defying expectation. But standing here in Alexander's arms, Catherine found she did not care. She had been invisible for so long, had accepted her place in the margins as unchangeable truth. But Alexander had proven what she had forgotten. That truth could be rewritten. That the end of one chapter was simply the beginning of another. "What are you smiling about?" Alexander asked, pulling back slightly to look at her face. "I was thinking about Lydia Worthington," Catherine admitted. "That young woman who fled my dining room in tears." Alexander's mouth quirked. "What about her?" "She told me that at my age love was impossible." Catherine looked up at him, at this man who had changed everything. She was wrong. Spectacularly wrong. Alexander agreed. "Love did not come despite my age." Catherine continued, the realization settling over her like grace. "It came because of it, because I was finally old enough to recognize it, wise enough to value it, strong enough to accept it." Alexander's arms tightened around her, "And I was finally mature enough to see beyond society's shallow demands, to recognize substance when I found it." They stood together as full darkness claimed the sky, as stars multiplied overhead like scattered diamonds. The nightingale's song continued, sweet and clear in the gathering night. And Catherine Hartley, who had been invisible for so long, who had believed her story already written and finished, felt her future unfold before her like gift. Not the future society had promised her, not loneliness or diminishment or slow irrelevance, but something far better, something earned through years of living and loving and surviving. A future with a man who saw her, who chose her, who loved her exactly as she was. At 32, Catherine had learned what she could never have understood at 19, that some loves were worth waiting for. That the best chapters sometimes came when you stopped expecting them. That being seen by the right person mattered infinitely more than being noticed by everyone. "Take me inside," she whispered to Alexander. "Take me home." "You are home," he replied, kissing her softly. "Wherever I am, you are home." And as they walked together through the gardens of Ashford Park, Catherine knew it was true. She had spent years believing she had no place, no future, no hope, but she had simply been waiting to be found by someone who understood that love was not about youth or beauty or society's narrow definitions. Love was about recognition, about two souls finding each other across the noise and cruelty and shallow judgments of the world. The Tun had declared that at her age, love was impossible. They had never been more wrong.